Welcome to today's social system mapping sense-making session for May 2nd, 2022. So glad you could all join us, and really happy to have you here. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, co-founder of SumMap and Greater Than the Sum, and Kara Martner, who's our producer and helps me accomplish much of the things that I do. And we'll be dealing with our technical management today. So for those of you who are new to this context or haven't been around for a while, what this is, just to give you some grounding in what we're about and to let you know if you're interested in continuing, is first of all, it's a vision about a possibility. So we believe that social system mapping can help action communities and transformation networks to get to a state of self-organizing more quickly and more wisely, and that it can catalyze greater potential in those kinds of initiatives. So this is about living into that potential. It's also an opportunity to learn about this kind of mapping, as well as to get familiar with and literate in the body of theory that supports our belief in the potential and that informs our mapping practice, and that is an essential ingredient of our map reading process. So it's also an opportunity, though, to contribute your own experience and expertise to this emerging mapping practice, because it's not just about theory, it's also about lived experience and insight into the dynamics of people working together in complex circumstances, which if you're here, I know you must have some of that. It's also a community of practice and field building with an intent for all of us to become essentially carriers of a culture of generative transformation and to explore how social system mapping can help develop that culture of generative transformation. So social system mapping is foundational to this community, but it's not just for the map makers. It's really for anyone who is interested in that intersection of social system mapping and cultures of transformation. So we welcome you to join us in whatever way makes sense for you. As we proceed, you'll start to get a better sense of how that could happen. Our agenda for today is we'll do some introductions and objectives. We'll look at quickly what is a social system map for those of you who haven't seen one before. We'll review the CDE model that comes from human systems dynamics. And then we'll do some open space breakouts, and then we'll do some review. So let me just take a peek at how, yeah, we're a manageable enough size group that I'm going to have us, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to have us, oh no, yeah, sorry. I built in options into my plan, and then I get confused which ones we're going with. Okay, so what I want to do is do some introductions, and since there's not too many of us, we'll go ahead and do them out loud. So let's just go in. Kara and I won't introduce ourselves, so the rest of you will. We'll go in alphabetical order so that you know when your turn is coming up. And you don't have to do it. We'll pause, and if you don't jump in and introduce yourselves, we'll move on to the next one. And we will give you each 45 seconds, and I'm going to time it, and so we'll stick to the timing. But you'll have 45 seconds to say your name, your pronouns if you like, your location, and then a network that you are, or networks that you are involved with, just a little bit about the network and or your role in networks in general if you're a consultant who generally works with a lot of networks. And so who's the first? I think Bill, you get to go first.
Great. So Bill All, he, him. I live in Spokane, Washington, or close to it. And I've been involved in various network weaving and network mapping projects over time. Right now, I'm working with, as part of a team of folks with a blueprint for regenerative finance, and we're mapping the system there. But I've also, anyway, I can stop. But I'm very interested in this process.
Great, thanks. Thank you. Brian, I think you're next.
I'm next. Okay, Brian Dowling, he, him. I'm in the Los Angeles area of California. I'm working with the California Donut Economic Coalition, and I've got some experience with systems thinking, but I'm fairly new to social systems mapping and network weaving. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for just a quick pause for those of you who just joined us, we're going in alphabetical order. So if you haven't, if your alphabet hasn't been passed, we'll get to you in alphabetical order, and you'll have 45 seconds to say your name, pronouns, location, and a network, or your role in networks that you work with. And I think Mary's next. Is that right?
I'm Mary Roscoe, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I realize I've been involved in movements most of my life in different ways, educational and the Children in Nature movement. And I've been interested and active in network weaving and mapping for, I think, since 2013, but still lots to learn, and that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, I think Nina Oliver. I hope I said that right. If you feel ready to introduce yourself.
Can I come in a bit later? I've just arrived in.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So, who's next after Mary then? L M N O P Q R S. Spencer. No, Proenza.
Right. So I'm from Brazil and I work with education, and we use these knowledge forums to make discussions. And I am also part of the youth from Francesco Economists that and we had recently some work related to internet economics. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome. Glad you're with us. Okay. Who comes after P? Spencer, I think that's you now.
I'll say good afternoon. I'm here in the UK. I'm Spencer Hodgetts. 2 years ago, I founded and I host Rebound Dog, which is building out to be a global ecosystem for social impact through the human-animal bond. Our mission is to create disruptive opportunities, to create opportunities for marginalized dogs and people to belong in society.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think it's either Chin or Tracy. Go ahead. Tracy, Tin, are you? I'm sorry. I think we're not going to get that person yet. Hopefully, eventually. Tracy, go ahead.
I wonder if Chin could chat, because sometimes, like, if the sound's not working or something.
Yeah.
Other option.
Yeah, and I don't have my chat open, so I haven't. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
So my name is Tracy Kunkler. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on the ancestral land of the Eastern Band of Cherokee, which is now Western North Carolina, and I'm a little west of Asheville. I'm the founder and co-director of Circle Forward. And so our relationship to networks is supporting networks in appropriate governance for those complex spaces and multi-organizational spaces. So we support networks to co-design the governance systems for their networks.
Cool, thank you. Oops, just on time. Okay, so Vicki, we are almost done with doing introductions. I'm hoping your your technology is hooked in enough that you can hear me. Okay, cool. And so Nina, and we're going in alphabetical order. And Nina, would you like to go now? Are you ready?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes,
Oh.
So my pronouns are she, her, and I'm in London, and I work within social community networks, but also I work within the prison system, working with inmates as well as officers and people who run the systems. So that's a little bit about me.
Great, thank you. And then Vicky, that leaves you.
Okay, just a little bit about me. I've been engaged in networks for maybe 15 years around and have done a number of mapping projects, including integrating into economic analysis, but I haven't done it for a while, and I'm interested in doing some more.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, Tin, last chance to introduce yourself before we jump into the content. And I will let you be. Okay, so 1 second. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. And so my hopes for you for this session are that you come away with a sense of the potential that we're inspired by, that you meet some cool folks and feel welcomed by them, that you're at least a little curious about human systems dynamics and social system mapping and how those two sort of frameworks and methodologies can inform each other and become greater than the sum of their parts. That you've been introduced to or deepened your understanding of the CDE model, and that you'll be able to apply the CDE model to your own network as well as to any social system map that you come across. So those are my hopes for you. But I know that you came with your own hopes. And so Kara, if you could put the, I'm using a little polling presentation tool called AHA Slides. If some of you are familiar with Mentimeter, it's a lot like Mentimeter, but it has some differences. And I am switching from Mentimeter to AHA Slides. So if you could go ahead and click on the link that Kara just put in the chat. If this, given your technical situation at the moment, if this is not easy for you to do or you just don't want to, feel free to ignore my invitation. But if you're going to do it, go ahead and jump into the slides. And then it should be giving you a space to type in your objectives for today, or what brought you here, why you, what you're hoping for from this session. I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute to, is everybody getting that? Okay, I'm seeing one response, so I can tell if somebody's getting it. And then I think you should be able to see each other's, can you see each other's responses as they're going in? Okay, thanks, Brian. And this one has a little scroll down, change, inspire and facilitate change. Fresh ideas, lovely. And, oh, hi, Jiva, thanks for joining us.
Morning.
Welcome. And I think in the Slack, Kara just put a link for you to the slide deck, or the sort of the polling tool that we're using. It's called AHA Slides. You'll have we'll have breakouts later, so we just did introductions, but you'll have an opportunity to introduce yourself later in breakouts. Okay, I'm gonna hope that everyone has, I think if you, lovely. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put, so I thought we'd try this thing. I'm trying a bunch of new things today, so hopefully they work. I'm going to, in this tool, we can vote. And so whatever has been put in there, I just wanted to give you all an opportunity. If someone else said something that you're like, yeah, that's what I want, that's what's important to me, I just wanted to give you a minute to sort of thumbs up what other people said, just so we can see what sort of commonalities we have in your motivations to be here today. And we have 7 votes, 8 votes, I think, is that everybody? 10 votes, no, it wasn't. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go to the next where we can see them in order of popularity, and so learn about instruments to be able to study complexity in practice. Great, that is wonderful. Open-minded exploration, learn more about how network maps can be used to inspire and facilitate change, and then refresh ideas for how social system map can be a benefit. So those are the top ones, but especially the learn about the instruments. So thank you for that. I'm going to start with, for those of you who are new to this, with what is social system mapping? And I need my notes. Okay. Sorry, this is taking me a moment. Okay, so a lot of things to click on here. Okay, so what is social system mapping? For those of you who are new or have been out of the loop for a long time, I like to say that social system mapping is essentially a mashup of system maps and stakeholder maps and asset maps and social network maps and concept maps. It can include elements of all of these kinds of maps. But although there's a lot of visual similarities among all of these maps, what's different and unique, and I think special about a social system map, is that it includes dimensions from all of these kinds of maps all together, and even more kinds of, there are other kinds of maps that might end up being fit into a social system map. And so it's far more layered and dense and complex than any one of those other kinds of maps on their own. It's also a process more than a product. It's online, interactive, accessible to all network members, and it's iterative and emergent. In other words, we can add new questions and more members as we go, and so it's and see how things change over time. So it's much more dynamic than any of those other kinds of maps that I just referred to as well. The point of social system mapping is really, it's essentially about systemic transformation. It's about supporting a global movement working to shift from systems of dominance and exploitation and extraction to systems of connection and reverence and regeneration. And the fact that you're with us here today tells me that you are already part of this movement and that you bring a lot of your own insight and experience to the table. And so I just want to take a moment here to reflect on the richness that we see right here in our Zoom interface, and to appreciate the efforts of all of you and other people around the world who are trying so hard to change the destructive trajectories that we're on at so many levels. So I just want to say I'm glad you're here both to learn about social system mapping, but I'm also just glad you're here to get a chance to know that you exist and to know a little teeny tiny bit about your work. So thank you for all of that. And I sincerely. Okay. So systemic transformation, one thing we've learned is that it requires strong networks of wise change agents. And so we see networks popping up to address all kinds of challenges all over the world, and that is really necessary and really wonderful. And yet, no matter what systemic issues that a network is trying to address, most of us have learned to survive, if not all of us, have learned to survive in this system that we call modern Western civilization that has been created by and for dominance, extraction, and exploitation. So this is what we know. This system that we're trying to change is what we are, is like the air we breathe. It's what we know. And so there's a lot that we still have to learn about how to work together in collaborative networks. And there's a lot to learn, not just about the systems that we're trying to shift. So it's not just about learning in the cognitive sense of learning about that stuff out there, but also about how to be human together and about how to work systemically together. And so there are two main areas where we need to shift, main sort of paradigms or worldviews that we need to work on no matter what goals, no matter what our goals for our networks are. So no matter what system we're focused on, there are these two shifts that we're aiming at, and one of which, well, the primary one is a relational shift. So social system mapping can help us make this relational, make us see and help us understand better this relational shift from a dog-eat-dog separate self paradigm to a much more symbiotic and interbeing paradigm where we understand how connected we are to one another and we act on that understanding, and not just one another as humans but all the other beings and the planet herself. And we understand that care is core to any of the system change that we want to enact. The less talked about but no less important shift in collaborative transformational networks is cognitive. And it's a shift from a mechanistic worldview to a complex adaptive systems worldview. So, and this shift actually requires us to think differently. So not just think about different things, but to actually perceive differently than we've been trained or forced to perceive, and then to process what we perceive differently. And so systemic change involves this cognitive practice as well as a relational practice. And our vision and our premise is that social system mapping can help us work on both of these levels at the same time. So a social system map can help us with a relational shift as well as a cognitive shift in a context that's personally relevant and meaningful and actionable. While we're learning, we're also taking action based on what we're learning. So it's meaningful and actionable because it's about us. So it's complex enough to give us practice in learning about complexity, where we can do something with what we practice. It's also useful because it's visual, and because it's visual, our brains process it differently than words or ideas, or even we have embodied learning, and visual learning is a piece of that, but it's another category as well, and it impacts our brains differently. And because it's visual, we can spot patterns in the data that we gather that there's really no other way to identify. So you would not ever know if you looked at this map. You would not. There's like right off the bat, there's a few patterns that I can call out right here. One of which is that most of these faces are white. That's a pattern. Another pattern I can spot is that there are a few people who are very well connected. You would not necessarily know either of those things without this map, and that can tell you a lot and give you stuff to work with. And it's also a social system map is also helpful in this cognitive shift because a social system map is interactive. We can zoom in and out and filter and look at different parts of the network depending on what we're looking for. Which is much less possible in a linear format. And that helps us start to understand and think, just sort of naturally start to think in different scales, which is also necessary in complexity. So that's sort of the underlying thinking, about social system mapping. And so one of the things I wanted to just have you think about for a moment, and then you can go into the AHA slides, your AHA slides tab or wherever it is, and just think about what are the biggest challenges that you have experienced or observed in networks. And if you don't mind, share that with us. Yes, dealing with complexity is a big one, isn't it? People tending to the network, whether it's economically or with their time and attention. Resistance. Worldviews. That's pretty fundamental. That worldview is one, it seems to me. Yep, the mind shift. Yes. The permeableness of the boundaries of the network. Power dynamics. How to work cooperatively. Yes. Yeah. Under-resourced people with little time to do anything other than what's, yes, that is a big one. Okay. Larger system pressures, yes. This makes me think of Michael Quinn Patton says, he's a founder of the developmental evaluation and has written a whole lot of books since then, but he's a sort of a global evaluation rock star, and he talks about how when programs are successful, they're successful because they have buffered themselves from the broader system. Which is, I can't say it succinctly right now, but part of the reason that they're successful is because they're not subject to the broader system. And once you try to get them more interconnected with the broader system again, then it undermines their success often. So that's the larger systemic pressures. Let's go ahead and vote, and just to see, which ones are more common amongst all of you. And I don't remember how many votes this got set up to be. So I don't know when you'll run out of votes, but I think it will tell you. Is this questions? Oh no, that's ideas. Okay. I think I'm going to go to the results now. I think that will, I'm not sure if you still get to vote after that, but we'll find the top ones. Larger systemic pressures, yes. And the dealing with complexity. Coming in and out. Working cooperatively. Yes, yep. Those are, okay, that's great. So what I'd like us to do is, I'm going to talk now about human systems dynamics and what we call in human systems dynamics the CDE model. And let's think about these challenges as we, and how they might be amplified, or how the CDE might help us think about these challenges a little bit more deeply and be able to influence them a little bit more. So, just gonna let me do that? Okay. I was hoping this slide would fill the thing so it's easier to read, but we'll go ahead with this. And I am sharing my stuff. Okay. So, wrong. Okay. I need one more thing. Okay, there we go. Sorry for the bit of fumbling. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, human systems dynamics is an approach to systems thinking especially related to human systems, obviously, and into complex adaptive systems. That's the focus of human systems dynamics. There are a lot of schools of systems thinking out there, and they're all can inform and often are used to inform a social system map. But I like to share human systems dynamics because it is very simple and very applicable. And in some ways, it's so simple that it's a little bit deceptive, and it's easy to just sort of go, I got all that, which I frankly did for years, until I really started to dig in and use it as a practice. And then it is really valuable. So this, I think, is a really good foundational starting point for thinking about complexity, especially in the context of social change networks. So, and the founder of Human Systems Dynamics is Glenda Young. So just if I refer to Glenda as we're talking, that's who I'm referring to. But so researchers, as I have alluded to, there's lots of different schools and lots of different research methodologies into systems thinking, but doing a meta-analysis across a broad range of complexity disciplines. Researchers discovered essentially 3 conditions that can apply that to self-organizing systems of all kinds that influence the speed of the self-organizing process, the pathways in the interim stages of the self-organizing process, and the outcomes and impacts of self-organizing. And so these 3 conditions do not cause emergent change, they do not allow you to predict outcomes, and they do not allow for the control of the process. But the more you're able to see and understand the patterns related to these 3 conditions, the more you can influence the conditions within the system that you're trying to take action in. So beginning to think in this way about any system, whether it's a system you're mapping, or it's the broader system, or it's the system of your body, or your family, can help us see things a little differently and interact with them with a little more insight and wisdom. So those 3 conditions are containers, differences, and exchanges. So this is a visual graphic of the containers, and then the differences are all these are agents. So the container holds the agents together. These are some kind of agents, whether they're ideas or people or organizations. And then the lines are exchanges across those differences. So what is a container? A container is any bounding condition. So anything that is holding a group or a population together. It can be, a charismatic individual can be a container, such as Bernie was a container for a while. Groups can be containers, values, perspectives. So for instance, I won't go into an example right this minute here. Goals can be containers. So everyone who's working on climate change is one kind of container. Everyone who's working on climate change by reducing, encouraging electric vehicles is a smaller container that fits within that larger container. Identities can be containers. Physical locations can be containers. Companies, etc. So if the container is too permeable and too loose, the energy within the system will dissipate, and we won't generate enough patterns across what's inside the container to actually create self-organizing. So this is that when people are coming and going, the energy comes and goes, and how do you actually work with that? So if the container is too loose, it will fall apart. There won't be a self-organizing system. If it's too rigid, it will stagnate. It will basically eventually die, because there's nothing new coming in and out. So how the container is defined and how permeable or rigid it is going to have an effect on how a group or how a system changes over time. Differences in the CDE, differences are any distinctions across parts of the system. So within that container, where are there distinctions? So let's say, you know, you're mapping a school system. The differences could be the students, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, the staff. Differences could also be different buildings within the school system. So all of these distinctions, and in any complex adaptive system, there are a lot of there's a number of distinctions, are what we're referring to when we're referring to differences. And the important thing about differences is that differences create tension, because there are different goals and different needs within, I mean, just naturally. You're not going to have differences and then have everything be exactly the same. That wouldn't make sense. So differences create tension, and tension is what creates the potential for change. So without tension, everything is just going to be really dull and boring and echo chambery. But when there's too much tension, the system can fall apart. So too little tension or too little difference or too much difference, in both those places, they can be a challenge and a problem. And so one of the biggest things we want to pay attention to in our networks is, where are the tensions? What are the differences that make a difference, the differences that are causing the tensions, and how can we work with those tensions to generate something new? Because tensions are both dangerous and can be generative and creative. So looking for that is an important piece of any kind of systemic work. Examples of tensions, especially in networks, can be different interests, different perspectives, such as the parent, student, teacher, administrator. Those are all different perspectives within a school system. Experience in networks can be a difference that actually makes a big difference. Culture can be a big difference. Learning styles, roles, formal and informal power, obviously, things like race, gender, etc. So all of these differences are part of what is going to impact how your self-organizing system, and if it becomes a self-organizing system. And then the E, the exchange. This is, in systems thinking, we often think of this as a flow or a transfer of energy or resources or information. So the examples are, if things like funding, friendship, swapping skills, trust is a kind of energy that is very important in networks, bartering, collaboration, relationships in general, communication, connection. So that's the CDE model. And that is, go to the next slide. So what I wanted to say was that there's a way that what I just told you can kind of seem self-evident, and at the same time, it is actually, if you don't think of it as a topic, like I could explain that, but like, do I look through these eyes? Do I look at things in this way regularly? So more and more, the more I get deeper into this, the more with our own community of practice, I see a problem and then I go, oh, that's a container problem. We don't have clear enough boundaries, or over here the boundaries are too tight, or, oh, that's an exchange problem. We need to shift our exchanges. So once you're able to sort of see in this way and identify containers, differences, and exchanges in any whatever context you're wanting to impact, that then can help us start to attend to, is the C or the D or the E in question sized appropriately for the purpose? There's no like right size of any of those things, but if they're not fit for the purpose that you need them to do, then you can start to think about how to adjust them. So let's do some together. So first of all, I'm going to review containers. So a container, again, is any bounding condition that holds us together. And I'm going to ask you to the degree, yes, Proenza, you can see these. We'll have a follow-up email that contains the slides. So I just saw your question in the chat. So go ahead and in AHA Slides, containers that if you think about the networks that you've worked with or the network that you're currently working with, what are the significant containers that show up? And I'm not talking about mapping here. I'm talking about before we even start to think about mapping, what are the containers? What's bounding this system? Is anything bounding this system? And I think you can enter as many thoughts as you want. We're not going to vote on these. We're just going to collect them. And I'm trusting that, do you all have access to AHA slides still? And so Kara just put a link to AHA slides in the chat if anyone has, where is it? Did I do the setting wrong? I'm gonna just stop sharing my screen. I hope you guys will stay open. I'm gonna just go in here, what containers? Oh, there they are. Okay. I was getting, so, I forgot to say this is going to be a word cloud because I forgot that. Other containers. Yeah, that prison container is fairly rigid. I would, not that it's funny, but getting in and out has a very a process around it that Okay, so let's I see places is coming up a couple times. Goals and subgroups, kinds of knowledge, perspectives as containers. Let's go to the next slide. So what is a difference? And one of the things I want to point out here is that containers can be multiple. So there can be, one container, let's say, what's an example? I'm just gonna, I don't know that much about Bernie Sanders' campaign, frankly, except for third party, but we could say that, Bernie himself was a container. He's a charismatic leader, and a lot of people were into Bernie Sanders at one point. And other containers were people who shared an agenda of Bernie, so it wasn't Bernie that they were attached to so much, it was Bernie's agenda that they were attached to. So that's a place where two containers overlapped and then create pretty much of a one biggish container, but there's some overlap. Once we've got a container, then we're looking at the differences inside of that container. And so something can be seen as a difference from one perspective, and it can be seen as a container from a different perspective. So if we're looking at a school system, we could say, that's the container. But let's say we're just going to look at, or within that school system, then different buildings are different containers within the school system, but so there are differences. And if we want to just look, we could just zoom into just a school and then look at the differences within that school. So depending on how you're zoomed in or out, we can call something a container or a difference, just depending on what we're trying to think about relative to the system and how zoomed in and out we are. So that can be a place that can be confusing. So I just wanted to comment on that. But so again, differences are the distinctions across the system, are the differences within the container. And so let's go ahead and have you think about what differences are there in the networks that you've worked in or that you're working in, the differences that especially are non-trivial and that can create tensions. Again, this is going to be a word cloud. Yeah, paid and unpaid labor, that's a good one. Top down versus bottom up, access to funding. Time zones. Time zones is such a, a challenging difference. Racial makeup. Just access to resources in general. To funding. Experience with power. Yep. Roles. Decision, who makes decisions. Size. Places, areas of work, personal experience, relationships to police. Yeah, that would be huge. Access to worldviews. Yeah, great. So those are the dimensions in your network that we can all feel when we're working in community, and we can all think about and sense, but it's hard to see the patterns across those differences. It's hard to really think about you know, I mean, we can hear people's, like, let's say, relationship to police. Odds are good that you could hear those differences in people when they verbalize, when they're talking when they're in conversation. But you can't necessarily step back and see altogether how that's playing out in terms of the relationships across the network. So these are valuable differences, and it would be to be aware of and to think about and to actually be intentional in working to shift or help them become generative. And it's hard to know what to do and to see that without something like a social system map. So the last thing is exchanges, flows of energy, resources, love, trust, shared language, funding, sharing skills. What are some of the exchanges that are either happening in your network or that you wish were happening and you can't tell if they are enough, or you can tell that they're not happening enough? What are the sort of, I ask this when I'm working with a mapping client, one of the first things I ask is, what do you want them to be doing together? Like, what is the exchange you want them to have? And it is contextual, it can depend. But communications and collaborations are, of course, huge ones. Sort of the fundamental exchanges. Yep, rural and urban, trust, credibility, love, community building, network weaving, resources, co-writing op-eds, yes, working together in various ways. Love. Useful practices. Yes, that's a good one. That's a shared learning types of programming. Okay. So this is wonderful, and I can tell that we are, everybody's pretty much, I'm going to pause my share for a moment. Gets the drift, is understanding the basic definitions of the C and the D and the E. And so our next step is to look at those in those three things, the C, D, and E, in the context of a social system map. And I have three social system. What we're going to do is we're going to do basically an open space kind of a session. We have three maps. And I'm debating with myself right now if three might be too many. How many people do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's just do two maps. So, Kara, you can remove the TSMNA one. Okay, thanks. So we're going to have, I'm going to show you a mirror board to let you interact with in a moment, but we're going to have you go into a room and pick a room to go into, and each room will have a different map to work with, and just look at the map and go through it and see if you can together identify the C's and the D's and the E's that are visible in that map, and also be looking for significant containers, differences, and exchanges that you think you would like to see and that aren't in that map. So you could say, oh, here's a difference I'm guessing is probably in this network, and they didn't map it. So looking for both what we can see and what we can't see in the map. But before we do that, we have to figure out, so I'm going to ask 2 people to help navigate in each room, 1 person for each room, and then 2 people to help facilitate the discussion in each room. So my first question is, who here, and just raise your hand either visually or on in the interface, is comfortable navigating in Kumu in a social system map? Like you've done this before and you kind of understand there's different views in the side panel and how to click around and like that. Who's comfortable doing that? And I see a lot of people who I don't know are, and I only see a few. Okay, so Tracy can do that. Anyone else? Able and willing to navigate? Okay, I'm going to shift this whole thing because I'm adaptive. I work on that. So we're just going to do one. We're just going to use our social system community of practice map. And so, and then so Tracy, you're going to be the navigator for our social system mapping community practice map, and you'll see how to get in a moment. But then I want someone else who isn't Tracy to just help facilitate the conversation, help people stay on track, or gently, lightly, and make sure that everybody's voice gets heard that wants their voice to get heard and that they feel welcomed. So who is willing to facilitate in a connective, belonging, trust-building kind of way of the conversation of that map? Mary, you will?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay, so Tracy and Mary are going to be in the room for the social system mapping community practice map, and so it's still a bit of an open space, but which I'll explain in just a second. So I think what we're going to do is, so this is the Miro board, and Kara will put a link to this board in the chat in a moment. And I wanted to also not just sort of be adaptive around, like make an open space around, basically I was giving 3 maps to work with and wanted to let you pick which room you wanted to be in based on, is someone in that room that I'd like to talk to a little bit more, like just based on how you want to connect with each other. But also recognizing that some of you may want to connect and some of you may want to actually engage with the activity. And some of you may be sort of like, I really want to just think more about the theoretical content. And so I put this, some more about the theoretical content up here, but you don't have to engage with it at all. And I think, Kara, what we'll do is let's just put, I just realized there's another room I didn't tell you about. So we should, this is me. So we'll have a room for the community practice social system map, which Tracy and Mary will host. And then we'll have another room in which I'm just going to hang out. And if you would like me to, if you just like to hang out and ask me more questions about any of the content so far, or give me your thoughts, I'll be in a room just to interact with. And then we'll have a quiet room. Kara, I forgot to mention that. So you can make a quiet room, hopefully. Where if you just want to sort of sit and go through a map yourself and drive, dig through the map and make your own, share your, just put your own thoughts down on Post-its, you can do that. So those are the 3 rooms that will be, we're going to open up in just a minute. And for those of you who aren't familiar with open space, this is a modified, simplified form. But with open space, we use the law of 2 feet, which means if you go in a room and it's not doing it for you for whatever reason, feel free to go somewhere else. So that's why we have a quiet room and a Christine room as well as a map room. So go interact with this content and with these maps in the way that works best for you. So you'll have 3 choices now. we can X off those two choices. No, that's not going to work. I won't bother doing that. But cross off the first two, either our community practice social system map, a quiet space, or actually it's going to be just come with me so that Kara can help people navigate. So there'll be 3 rooms, and Kara will be in the main room. So if you get stuck, you can go back to her and she can help you navigate. And then within the map rooms, so which is basically the one, we're going to do this middle one, the pink one. And if you want to work together with other people, you can use this top one. Or if you want to just work on your own, you can use the bottom one. Other people might be putting their own Post-its in there as well. The map is right here. So if you click on this link, is everybody in the Miro board? I'm going to just put this link right into the chat as well. So this is the involvement view of our, always puts me up first because I'm the most central person. I wonder why. I'm kidding. So I get loaded first. But anyway, so this is our community of practice map as it is at the moment, which is currently in a state of being iterated and evolved. But so you can get to that, and Tracy will navigate around, and Mary knows this map quite well as well, so I'm sure Mary can help with that. If you want to navigate on your own, I just put the link in the chat so you can just go there by yourself. But please do, to the degree that you're willing and able, put the containers and the differences and the exchanges that you see into Post-its in the Miro board. If you're not familiar with that, you can just click on this sticky note icon over here, pick a color, plunk it in there, and it should then you should double click in the Post-it, and then you can type. And a good trick to know is if you just hit tab, it will make another one, so you don't have to go and continually keep dragging. Okay, so Kara, let's give them 20 minutes, and just feel free. The invitation is to just do what works for you, and if that means just coming and chatting with me, that's great. But I wanted to give you a chance to apply the C and the D and the E to a social system map and think about what of those things are visible and what aren't in a map. And I'm gonna stop sharing. And Kara, now you can try and put me in that room and give everybody the option to go where they want to go.
Excellent. We should be all set.
Pardon me?
We should be all set to go.
Okay. Hey. Welcome back. Is that everyone? Have we got everyone back? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that go? Was that, just feel free to unmute and voice, don't just feel free to treat this like a conversation. Just chime in. How did that go?
You know, when I think about looking at this and what information I got about differences, you can tell that there's various skills. I mean, you can tell that there's quite a list of differences, but you can't really tell where the tensions are.
Mm, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good comment. And so I've said that we're working on that map, on updating it, making it, and I think we'll give some thought to, are there ways to tell that? Some of the ways you can infer. I mean, some of the things about the C and the D and the E, we can't actually literally visualize because we can't actually ask them in a direct way that will get honest answers, but we can still infer by the patterns of the relationships. So if you see, for instance, that, difference A and difference B, there's no connection between, like, they're not talking to each other, or they're talking a little bit, but no one's collaborating. You can infer that there's, whether it's attention or not, there often is a need to find ways to help them connect across that difference more. So, But that was a really valuable comment. So how did the just the process itself go? Was that okay for people? I'm just wanting a little feedback on that. It was just okay, Brian?
I think it was a little challenging.
Okay.
Bill had it related to what we don't see, some suggestions, and before, we're sort of getting towards the end. So Bill, do you want to share those?
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Of course, process-wise, for me as new to this map in particular, I've used Kuma before, is maybe a little bit more step-by-step before asking those big questions might be helpful. So I was thinking about values orientation or commitments on individual levels, or theory of change on the network level might be data that would be interesting. Whether you're working professionally in the field or just interested, in terms of getting at some of those tensions, that's just one, resource tension. So those are the kinds of things. And I know there's a balance of how much depth versus overwhelmed with questions you can have on a survey and like that. Yeah, I mean, I could go on, but that's those kinds of questions that get at some of the more intangible aspects that would help to make it visible for folks, like, what's the difference between these networks? Why did, without having to, before I get to the stage of looking at each one. And one last thing, from the network weaving playbook, maybe you do this already, but we were talking about the periphery being a challenge, that there's a lot of people on the periphery. If there was maybe some one-on-one interviewing or appreciative inquiry invitation that could help to fill in the relationships that might be invisible on the map.
Thanks. Anyone else have anything, and in general, what did you notice about the map and the relationship to the CDE?
It seemed to me a lot of it, when I was looking at, my own connections with other people as far as collaboration goes, and it seems to be that there's a lot of personality of, I'm a more internal kind of introspective type of person, composed to other people who are more gregarious and going all over the place. And I think that might make a difference in the kind of way the map is related with everybody. Because I've got a few connections, but I'm really in-depth studying with those people, where other people have a lot of different connections, but I'm not quite sure how they're relating to them. So I think that might be another aspect.
Yeah. Anything else? Go ahead, Mary.
Just to clarify, I think the header on the map said social systems mapping field. Is that correct?
I think it says social system mapping ecosystem. Yeah.
So I was thinking of it as the community of practice map, but in terms of containers, it's larger than that. It's the field, and then the connections are probably more related to the community of practice as a container.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Came up for anyone else? Just anything? Comments? Last thoughts?
I would like a little bit more information on the exchanges. I mean, you can tell supposedly the strength, and there's a very, little bit about the typology in terms of acquaintance versus collaboration. But I'd like to know what's being exchanged. Yeah, I just think that there's something in there about if we shift to a relational view, understanding what those relationships are more, instead of our very, general kinds of categories, right? That we have.
Yeah. Yeah, Spencer, you had a comment.
It follows on from Brown's comment and then Vicky's. On that map that you showed us, if somebody, say like Brown, has 6 very strong connections, I guess it shows a very thick line between those 6 people. What if somebody, say like myself, has 100 connections on a hypothetical map, but is only connected with 5 very strongly? Does it differentiate between the 5 and the 9? Oh, you put thumbs up. Yeah. So somebody could see who is the warm connect. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You can filter based on the answers to the connections. Okay, Tracy just jumped up. So just a last comment. Your comments we are keeping, and we are in the process of iterating our questions that we're asking in our social system map. Part of the point of social system mapping is to start where you can. And if that's a rather general place, it's better than nothing, because you get people's heads sort of into it, and then you can start to think more deeply. But then a big piece of the intention for the process is then to continue to deepen the questions and to to make changes and to ask people to come back in and update again. So those of you, Nine, I see you have to leave. It looks like you have to leave. We have a goodbye ritual, and I'm going to go ahead and start that. If you have 1 more minute, be great, but jump off if you need to. So the goodbye ritual is for all of us to unmute, and then I'll count down from 3, 2, 1, and at 1 we just give each other our blessings and our appreciation for being here and for the day. So if you have a second, let's unmute. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and for sharing.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thank you. Hugs everyone.
Fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.